All right. One thing we haven't really done with some of my Cursor videos is just kind of give an overview of the editor. If you're familiar at all with Visual Studio Code, it's going to seem extremely similar because it's based on Visual Studio Code. There are maybe a few key differences, and I'll hit those in a second, but if you're familiar with Visual Studio Code, there's notion of what files you have, search, your source control, your kind of play menu, and your testing. Does seem to want to make this more of a bigger bar here. Visual Studio Code tends to like to use a vertical line there, so they are a little different in terms of their layout there. I don't think one's necessarily better than the other, but they're very, very similar. One thing to kind of realize is, there's probably a ton of ways to configure it, so this is kind of how I have it. I'm looking at like a README file. I'm looking at some source control stuff here with a bunch of terminals open. Probably one big differentiator is you have integrated chat. And if you have GitHub Copilot, you'll have this as well. If you have Cursor, you'll also have this composer. This is where you can tell it to go and do things in your solution. That's kind of some of the big differences. Some little things to maybe notice, like the testing is right here and integrated. You can actually run all your tests if you want. You can debug these much like you would in Visual Studio, and it'll hopefully show all of them passing. I am going to bring in Visual Studio Code, looking at the exact same solution. Very, very similar. Visual Studio Code does now have this edit in Copilot mode, kind of similar to what Cursor has as well. Here again, I'm looking at the same README file. Play is very similar in both. You just go ahead in here and click run, and it'll debug the current project. Source control is here. Here's the extensions. I think that's a little different to get to in Cursor. Testing is very, very similar. You can actually go through and run them in much the same way. So very, very similar between the two, but not the exact same. That's some of the differences. Very, very similar editor. If you have experience with Visual Studio Code, Cursor should feel almost like jumping into something you've done before.